When we consider the weapons of the Second World War, our minds are drawn to iconic images: the thunderous roar of the Tiger tank, the screaming dive of the Stuka, the awesome power of the battleship. These were instruments of immense destruction. But they were not the deadliest. The single most lethal weapon of the conflict was not a machine of steel or explosive device. It was an idea, a virulent, state-sponsored ideology of racial hatred that found its ultimate expression in the systematic, industrial annihilation of human beings. This ideology, and the bureaucratic machinery built to enact it, was the most deadly weapon deployed between 1939 and 1945. It was a weapon that turned neighbors against neighbors, doctors into killers, and entire nations into accomplices to genocide. Its primary target was the Jewish people of Europe, but its scope also encompassed Roma, Slavs, the disabled, political dissidents, and countless others deemed unworthy of life. This is the story of that weapon, from its ideological origins to its horrifying methodical application. To understand this weapon, we must first examine its blueprint. The ideology of Nazism did not emerge from a vacuum. It was born in the bitter stew of post-World War I Germany, a nation humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, crippled by economic collapse, and seething with a desire for a scapegoat. Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist German Workers' Party expertly channeled this national anger and fear. At its core, Nazism was built upon a twisted foundation of pseudoscience and ancient prejudice. The concept of racial hierarchy, with the so-called Aryan race at the pinnacle, and all others, particularly Jews, positioned as parasitic subhumans, was its central tenet. This was not mere political rhetoric. It was codified into law with the 1935 Nuremberg Laws, which stripped German Jews of their citizenship and basic human rights. The weapon was being loaded. Years of relentless propaganda, orchestrated by Joseph Goebbels, dehumanized the Jewish people, portraying them as vermin, a bacillus infecting the pure body of the German nation. This systematic dehumanization was the essential first step. It was the psychological priming necessary to make the unthinkable possible. For you do not simply kill a human being, you exterminate a pest. With the outbreak of war in 1939, the ideology shifted from theory to brutal practice. The invasion of Poland was not just a military campaign, it was a racial crusade. Following behind the Wehrmacht were the Einsatzgruppen, special task forces whose mission was the systematic murder of Poland's intelligentsia, political leaders, and Jews. This was the weapon's first live-fire exercise. Ghettos were established in cities like Warsaw and Lodz, walling in the Jewish population in squalid, overcrowded conditions to slowly starve and die of disease. But this bullet-by-bullet method soon proved, from the Nazi perspective, to be logistically slow and psychologically taxing for the executioners. The invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, Operation Barbarossa, opened a new and more horrific chapter. The Einsatzgruppen now operated on a scale of murder previously unimaginable. They would round up entire Jewish communities, men, women, and children, march them to nearby ravines or anti-tank ditches, and murder them with machine gun fire, one by one. At Babi Yar in Ukraine, over 33,000 Jews were killed in just 2 days. The psychological toll on the shooters and the inefficiency of the process pushed the Nazi regime to seek a more clinical, industrial, and detached method of killing. Sometime in the latter half of 1941, the decision was taken to implement what the Nazis euphemistically called the final solution to the Jewish question. This was the weapon's final, perfected form, a program of systematic, continent-wide genocide. The Wannsee Conference in January 1942, chaired by Reinhard Heydrich, was not where the decision was made, but where the bureaucratic logistics were coordinated. Here, high-ranking officials from various state ministries calmly discussed the mechanics of mass murder as if it were an industrial production problem. The weapon was now a seamless fusion of ideology and bureaucracy. The entire apparatus of the German state was mobilized for this single purpose. The railway department scheduled the trains, the finance ministry confiscated property, the interior ministry provided citizenship records, industry used the slave labor. It was this cold administrative efficiency that made the Holocaust uniquely terrifying. It was not a frenzy of violence, but a calm, calculated process. The most chilling manifestation of this bureaucratic industrial killing machine was the extermination camp. While concentration camps like Dachau and Buchenwald had existed since 1933, the extermination camps, Chelmno, Sobibor, Belzec, Treblinka, and the complex of Auschwitz-Birkenau were designed for one purpose: assembly line murder. The process was horrifyingly standardized. Victims were transported in cattle cars, often for days without food or water. Upon arrival at Auschwitz, a Nazi doctor would perform a selection on the ramp, a swift wave of the hand deciding between immediate death and a temporary reprieve of slave labor. Those deemed unfit, the elderly, the sick, mothers and their young children, were told they were going to the showers for disinfection. They were led into large, underground chambers disguised as shower rooms. Then, Zyklon B pellets were dropped in, releasing prussic acid gas. Death took up to 20 minutes. Special prisoner work units, the Sonderkommando, were then forced to remove the bodies, extract any gold teeth, and cremate the remains in vast furnaces. This was the ultimate expression of the deadly weapon, the reduction of human life to a logistical problem of transport, processing, and disposal. The sheer scale of the devastation wrought by this ideological weapon is almost beyond human comprehension. By 1945, 2 out of every 3 Jews in Europe had been murdered, approximately 6 million human beings. The vibrant, centuries-old Jewish civilization of Eastern Europe was virtually extinguished. But the Jewish people were not the only targets. The Nazis also systematically murdered up to 3 million Soviet prisoners of war through starvation and execution. They killed at least 250,000 Roma and Sinti people in what they called the Parajmos, or the devouring. They murdered tens of thousands of people with physical and mental disabilities in the T4 euthanasia program. They targeted homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and political opponents. The total death toll of the Nazis' genocidal policies is estimated to be between 11 and 17 million people. Each number represents a life, a story, a world extinguished by an ideology that judged them unfit to live. The weapon's legacy did not end with the collapse of the Third Reich in 1945. Its use had profound consequences that echo to this day. The sheer horror of the Holocaust led directly to the Nuremberg trials, which established the legal concepts of crimes against humanity and war crimes, holding individuals accountable for actions taken under state orders. It spurred the creation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 and the Genocide Convention. The State of Israel was founded in 1948 as a direct response to the genocide, a homeland and a refuge for the Jewish peoples. The psychological and cultural scars on the survivors, their descendants, and indeed on all of humanity are deep and permanent. The Holocaust stands as the ultimate warning of what can happen when hatred is codified into law, when science is perverted to justify racism, and when ordinary people are persuaded to participate in or remain indifferent to the destruction of their fellow human beings. The most deadly weapon of World War II was not one that could be aimed and fired. It was a poison that infected minds, a blueprint for hell drafted in tidy offices, and a chilling testament to the human capacity for organized evil. Remembering it is not just an act of historical tribute, it is a necessary defense against the darkness ever taking hold again.